Hello again, and welcome to the second class of this three-part mini-series. Today, we're going to talk about little people, big feelings, and maybe also big people and big feelings too. We're going to be looking at navigating emotions through the lens of human design. So over the past few years, emotions and emotional regulation, quite rightly, has really come to the surface. So I want to introduce you to a couple of aspects in human design that will really help you, again, to personalize those kind of tools that you might be coming into contact with already. So how to personalize emotional regulation and how to understand your family's emotions on a deeper level through the lens of human design. Let's go. So these are the three classes in this mini series. Hopefully you've already watched Parenting by Human Design, the Basics, class number 1. If you haven't, please pause this and go back and watch that first. Now we're on class 2, Little People, Big Feelings. One of Ra's quotes, again, that I love is this, and this is really the essence of what human design is about. It's really about the science of differentiation and accepting one another for our differences. If you allow someone to be who they are and they allow you to be who you are, then that's love. Anything else is torture. But how often do we go through life wanting someone to be who they're not, wanting someone to be different, wanting somebody to change? Through human design, we can understand people as they truly are and hopefully have acceptance for that and realize that things are not personal. Like a lot of the time, they're just mechanical, they're energetic. It's just the way things are. And when we have that understanding, when we have that awareness, we can take whatever action feels aligned then, whether it's to continue having an interaction with that person or not. But we can basically understand that the way that sometimes someone is behaving oftentimes is not personal. That's the way that they're designed. So this is one of the things that human design can bring to us. What we're going to be focusing on today is really the solar plexus centers. So there are 9 energy centers in the human design body graph, and we're going to be looking at the solar plexus center. This governs emotions and feelings. It's one of the 3 awareness centers, and it's about making sense of our experiences to learn, grow, and cultivate wisdom through emotional depth. Emotions lead us to greater awareness and connection to ourselves and each others. However, most of us have been raised to suppress emotions. We don't understand emotions. We weren't usually raised or educated with any concept really or awareness of our emotions other than like this good, this bad. Like that's kind of where a lot of us are coming from. And a lot of conscious parents, gentle parents, have a desire to raise their children, our children, differently, so they understand emotions, so they're allowed to feel the emotions, so they can express them, not suppress them. But we're still kind of at the early stages of working out what this looks like. So I really hope the information in this class is, again, just going to give you that extra level, that extra key to unlock this aspect of parenting, so that you can do this again on an elevated level. So through human design, we can see who experiences emotions consistently and who experiences them inconsistently. This also tells us who has the potential to amplify the emotions of other people. This is huge. This oftentimes, when people understand this part, they're like, oh, so it wasn't that, it was that, oh my God, oh my God. There are so many light bulb moments from this. With this awareness, we can choose to understand, where we are and where our children are, and whether to feel feelings or whether to release feelings. And then depending on whether the center is defined or undefined, we can apply a little bit of a nuance as to how we and our children emotionally regulate. So there are little ways that we can, again, personalize and experiment basically with personalizing emotional regulation, depending on the definition of our human design chart, specifically on the solar plexus. So what we're going to be looking at really in the class is whose emotions are they? A lot of the time we witness emotions in ourselves or in others, and they're pretty much always going to feel like they're ours because this is us and this is our experience. But through this understanding, we might have a different kind of awareness that, oh, maybe it's not ours, or maybe that's not my child. Maybe there are amplifying emotions of somebody else. So we're going to look at the definition of the solar plexus. We're then going to look at the 4 types of waves. So if somebody has a defined solar plexus, there are 4 different ways. They can have more than one. So we're going to look at the differences in those. And then I'm going to leave you with a few tips that you can experiment with. The tips that I give you are never hard and fast rules. I'm not here to tell you what to do. You're here to be your own authority. That is the basis, the foundation of human design. But these are things that I have come to realize through my own experimentation and through working with other people for so many years, So these are things that you can try and just see if they work for you. Everybody experiences emotion. So when I talk about in this class about emotional beings and non-emotional beings, I'm not saying that people with an undefined solar plexus don't experience emotions ever and that everything that you're always feeling is from someone else. That's not what I'm saying. Everyone experiences emotions, but some people are designed to be giving out emotional energy, whilst others are designed to be taking it in, to be receiving it, and potentially amplifying it at 200%. So that's kind of the goal of what I want you to see and understand in this class is like who falls into which of these two categories. So what that means when looking at parenting is the emotions that you witness in your child having like a big meltdown or just feeling a lot of things may not be theirs. And I want you to just take a moment to sit with that, because that's usually, as we go through this, the big aha that people have. You see the highly emotional, highly sensitive child, and you think, oh God, what's wrong with them? Da, 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 da. It might not be them. It might not be them. So let's take a look at some of the potential messages around emotions that you might have received in your childhood, because it's important to take a step back first and look at that. Because, like I always say, unless we have awareness, we parent from our own experience, from our own perceptions and our own projections, okay, based on what happened to us, based on what we had or didn't have, what we needed or didn't need. And that's how we parent. That's our default mode, unless we have awareness of something different. So when we're young children, children are like giant sponges, okay? All children under the age of 7 and even kind of going past that, they're like giant sponges. They're taking everything in. This tends to be when most conditioning occurs, because these are the years where our formative beliefs and behaviors are built. It's not to say that beliefs and behaviors can't be built and certainly changed after this age. Of course they can. I'm a hypnotherapist. I help people to change beliefs and behaviors all the time. But this is where the foundation occurs. And when I've, working as a hypnotherapist over the years, what I've often seen is even when somebody comes to me in their 40s and say, oh, this has just been going on for like 10 years since I was 30. When I trace it back and when we regress them back and back, it's often going back to an event that happened in the first 7 years of their life. So I know this not only from a basis of what I've learned, but also from what I've experienced of working with so many people over the years. What then happens is once we have a belief or a behavior, we experience what's called confirmation bias, which is a reinforcement of beliefs. We're always looking for evidence that supports our beliefs, whether it's positive or not. So if you have a limiting belief about yourself and somebody says something and you interpret that to be a reinforcement of your limiting belief, that is just going to keep that limiting belief going round and round in your subconscious and also potentially in your conscious awareness. So here are some examples of parental or familial or societal or cultural conditioning that you may have heard. Obviously, there are numerous ones. These are just kind of things that came to mind. As I read through this, maybe some other things come up for you as well. And it just, again, helps for you to become aware of your conditioning, because a lot of things are just sitting in our subconscious or unconscious. And until we bring them into our conscious awareness, we don't understand that those are operating the way that we react and the way that we experience life. So you may have heard things, for example, like don't cry, you're too sensitive, man up, boys don't cry, anger is a weakness, cheer up, be happy. A white lie never hurt anyone. Children should be seen and not heard. Nice girls don't do that. Big boys don't cry. You have to be cruel to be kind, and so on and so forth. Now, don't cry is a really common one. And again, working as a therapist, 9 times out of 10, if people started to break down in my sessions and they started to cry, the first thing they would say is, I'm sorry. Because a lot of us have a conditioning that when the crying is bad, or that when we start to cry, we're, making the other person feel uncomfortable. So it's very telling as to what someone's conditioning is with what they say when an emotional reaction happens. As I say, most of us have, in my experience, been, kind of told to suppress our emotions, and this leads to a number of different issues. We don't understand our emotions. We're basically got the emotional reactivity of toddlers, and yeah, they can get stuck in our body. It can cause all kinds of like physical ailments as well. So understanding emotions, being able to release and regulate emotions is very, very important for us and for our children. When our children are learning about emotions, and primarily they're going to start by learning about emotions from us as their parents, it often triggers us because of our own conditioning. So again, we don't have this. We're starting to learn now, but we don't generally have this in-depth understanding of emotions and what's okay and what's not okay, because we've been told like it's not okay to be like that and it's okay to be like that. And it basically comes down to acceptance and authenticity. We need both of these things as children, okay? But in order to be accepted, if we learn that it's not okay for me to express myself like that, we start to change ourselves. We kind of put aside our authenticity and our expression in order to be accepted and to be loved, because when we're very young, we need that from our caregivers. Okay, so we start to suppress ourselves, we start to suppress our emotions, and they stay there stored up, bottled up. Again, the language that we use is very telling, bottling things up. There's only so much you can put in a bottle, and especially if you shake it and trigger it before it explodes. So a lot of the time we're not aware of the emotions, all of these things that are below the surface, deep inside us. So when our child reacts in a way, when our children, particularly when they're in those toddler stages, and they're just kind of going through the motions of all of these things, they're just feeling their feelings. How we react or respond to that is often going to be because of our own conditioning. We're going to react in the way that our parents reacted to us, or it's going to bring something up inside of us. Many adults have conditioning around emotions and trapped emotions. So, like I said before, they have emotional reactions of a toddler. You may have experienced that yourself, you may have witnessed that in someone else. That's not a judgment, that's just the way things tend to be. And again, it's not your fault. I always say that I have huge respect for all of us who are, trying desperately to be as conscious and gentle and aware as we can as parents of our children and of our children's needs, whilst at the same time breaking cycles, breaking patterns, and healing and reparenting ourselves. And it's a lot. So I just want you to take that on board and give yourself a big pat on the back that you even care and that you're even trying to do this work, or that you're even interested in learning. Nothing I say is ever intended to make you feel shame or guilt. Um, Everybody is doing the best that they can. So if you recognize you've had emotional reactions towards your child and you feel that that wasn't, you weren't kind of like in your best place, it's okay. The biggest thing that we can do is then make amends and apologize to our child, because we're also then showing them that it's important to take responsibility for our reactions. No one's perfect. We're going to all do things that we're not proud of from time to time. So how do we change as adults? How do we change our conditioning? Okay, so the first thing is to become aware of your conditioning. The second thing is, what can you do to change it? So there's a common term in human design called deconditioning. And what this is, to explain this to you in case you come across it, because I'm probably going to mention it as well, it's about becoming aware of your not self themes. So we have not self themes for each of the 9 energy centers in human design, or unhealthy definition. So we can have a defined center and still be in an unhealthy expression of it. So basically becoming aware of our shadows, unhealthy behavior, unhealthy expression, and coming into alignment with our true self. So that's kind of encapsulates the term deconditioning. Your human design chart, and this is why I love human design, it provides a map for this. So when I've been, was working as a hypnotherapist without human design, I'm just kind of like going through the motions with things and, just kind of understanding, piecing things together. When I started incorporating human design, I'm like, I can really see instantly at a glance, well, this is your true self. This is your strength. This is your potential. This is probably where you've been conditioned. And it gave me this map to be able to essentially like fast track working with people to get results, because it allows you to see wherever you're defined is you, that's your truth. And so it allows us to shift towards that and understand where to work essentially according to your conditioning. So it provides us a really amazing map, and then you can personalize these different tools to help somebody shift habits, beliefs, and behaviors. So for adults, deconditioning is a many layered process. It can take some time. There's not a time limit on it. It's like peeling an onion. There's one layer and another and another and another. You can think that you've done a lot of deconditioning work, and then something happens, and again you get triggered. Or I thought I'd done a lot of deconditioning work, and then I became a mother, and like all these other things came up. So it's probably never ending for adults, to be honest with you. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It can also be incredibly uncomfortable. But I personally believe it's a necessary part of conscious and intentional parenting for us to be growing alongside our children, for us to be, becoming the best parents and role models we can be through working on ourselves. And again, like I said, this is hard. We're doing two things at once. We're trying to raise our kids without conditioning, and then we're trying to decondition ourselves. That's a lot. It really is. But I think we can do it, or we can at least make our very best attempts to do that. My hope is, my vision is that if we understand our kids from an early age, they won't need to decondition, or at least not as much as we have had to do. Like I said, we're all going to sort of do things that, like, oh, I wish I hadn't done that. I wish I hadn't said that. We can still make amends. None of us are going to parent perfectly. There is no perfect parenting. Okay. But hopefully, with this information, our kids just won't need to go through therapy and soul searching like we've probably had to do as adults. It's really important when you look at your human design chart, because our mind has a tendency to see the negative and hold on to the negative. It's really important when you look at your chart, because this comes up over the hundreds, thousands of people I work with. This always comes up. Oh, I don't have that. Oh, I wish I had that. Like, we get this, like, not good enough kind of theme playing in our mind, because we think, I don't have that. If I had that, I would be able to do this. You have what you have in your human design chart. When you look at your birth chart, that's what you have. That energy, what is defined is what's true for you. Everybody experiences potential energy of all the chart, right? Because we're interacting with other people, and so we're influenced by other people's energy. We're influenced by the transits of the planets. But what you have defined in your birth chart, what you have colored in, is you. That is your truth. Nothing is good or better or bad or worse. You don't have something and not have something. You also need to recognize that all energy is on a spectrum. So you can have your definition, but you could still be in an unhealthy expression of that energy. Okay. So there's having your definition, there's having your truth, and then there's also being in a healthy expression of that versus an unhealthy expression. You can still get conditioned in your defined centers. Okay. I've experienced that myself, and I've seen that with a lot of clients. Right, solar plexus center. This is what we're going to focus on today. So as I said, this is one of the three awareness centers, the three awareness centers being the solar plexus, the spleen, and the ajna. We're just focusing on the solar plexus here today. This is about emotional and spiritual awareness, passion, desire, abundance of spirit, feelings, moods, sensitivity, and nervousness. Okay, all of the feelings, all of the emotions. It's about making sense of our experiences to learn, grow, and cultivate wisdom through emotional depth, because emotions lead us to greater awareness and connection. Sometimes they feel like they can lead us away from people, but again, that's based on our conditioning, because some of us have been, just shamed into the emotions that we felt and not understanding how to express those, not really understanding communication, because again, communication is this key skill that we're not really taught in school. We're not really taught as children, or not many people that I know anyway, at least not when I was in school. So in terms of the population, it's important for people to know all of this information, regardless of whether they have a defined or undefined solar plexus, because it's approximately 50% split. So, as you go through life, you're invariably going to meet and interact with people who have the opposing definition to you. So if yours is defined, you will meet people who have it undefined. If you're undefined, you will meet people who have it defined, unless you go and live in a cave for your entire life. Which is probably, even if your cave's environment, probably not going to happen. Anyway, so what the difference is here between these two, defined is when it's colored in. So when you look at the solar plexus center here in the chart, it will be colored in if you have it defined. Okay, so whenever I say something is defined, it is colored in the birth chart. Wherever something is colored in, it's defined. This is consistent. This is true within someone. This doesn't change. So this person who has it defined is consistently pushing out emotional energy. They're projecting out emotional energy. They're always feeling some kind of emotion. Okay, so they have what's called an emotional wave. So think about it, and the wave in the ocean, it's going up and down, up and down, up and down, but it's always there. It's never gone. Okay, it's always there, up and down, up and down. Sometimes they feel high, sometimes they feel low. Now they find clarity, and this is when it comes to making decisions. Anyone with a defined solar plexus has emotional authority. They find clarity and they make decisions when they don't have a strong emotional charge. So imagine that wave for a moment has just become a bit calmer, and it's not undulating up and down. It's become a bit calmer. When somebody has an undefined solar plexus, this is about 40%, 47% of the population, they don't have a consistent way of experiencing emotions. So the defined person is pushing the emotions out, the undefined person is taking them in and potentially amplifying the emotions of those around them. Okay. Again, this can be shifted a little bit with awareness. Like when I learned that I had an undefined solar plexus, I was like, it was huge. I was like, oh, so that makes sense that when I'm with that person, I went, oh, suddenly I'm like overwhelmed by these emotions. And I always identified with them and thought it was me, when I realized it wasn't. And this was huge for me, like finding this out, fortunately, before I became a therapist, because otherwise I could have been super drained, always taking in and, often wanting to fix the emotions of other people instead of just witnessing them and experiencing them. So when you have an undefined solar plexus, you don't have to amplify the emotions of people around you, but you typically will until you understand a different way of doing that. So if you have a child with an undefined solar plexus and they're very young, they're going to naturally be amplifying the emotions of other people around them until they become of an age where you can start to help them understand, hey, all of that you're feeling, all that energy, that's not yours. You can just let it go. But you're not going to be able to explain that to them when they're a newborn, or probably even when they're a toddler. It's going to be when they're a little bit older. So this is huge to understand this, because typically in a family you're going to have a mix of some people that are defined and some people that are undefined. Again, defined, colored in. This is your imprint, this is your nature, this is pushing the energy out. Undefined or open, not colored in. This is a receptor, this is nurture, this is where we can kind of be influenced or conditioned. This is where you're taking energy in and potentially amplifying it 200%. So this applies to all of the 9 energy centers. Today we're just focusing on the solar plexus because we're just talking about emotions, but this concept applies to all of the 9 energy centers. What you're projecting out, what is really important for you to be aware if you have a defined solar plexus, what you're projecting out affects others and will be reflected back to you multiplied. So don't just kind of go, oh, well, I've got a defined solar plexus, so it's cool. I can just kind of feel my emotions. You still need to have that awareness that what you are projecting out is going to affect other people. Again, particularly in a family dynamic, if you are the parent that has a defined solar plexus, being aware of your emotions and maintaining like a healthy state as much as possible and a healthy expression of that defined solar plexus is going to be very important, so that your children who have an undefined solar plexus can grow in the wisdom of that emotional awareness and emotional intelligence rather than be conditioned by it, because the conditioning of the undefined solar plexus is avoiding truth and confrontation. And that's just people that are shying away from any emotional experiences and wanting to go and hide away because they can't handle the emotional experiences of people, and they don't get to learn then. Everywhere where you're undefined, where it's open or it's white in your chart, is where you're here to learn, where you're here to grow in wisdom. Okay, so it's really important that we understand this dynamic of those that have something defined projecting out a healthy expression, so those that have a center undefined get the benefit of like the wisdom of that energy. Putting it into practice. So here are some tips for all of the different 4 combinations that we would have, okay, in terms of the definition of the solar plexus. We can have the parent being defined and the child being undefined or open. If this is the case, you want to become aware, you as the parent want to become aware of your emotions and get to know your emotional wave. Okay, so get to know over time, if you're feeling up or down. Take time alone when you're feeling a bit low. You don't have to kind of be able to know exactly how your wave's going, but just again, get in touch with yourself and recognize, are you feeling a little bit low? If so, take time alone. But also make sure you tell your kids as well, like, I'm just feeling like, mom just needs a little bit of time by herself. I'm just going to go into my room for 10 minutes. You guys can keep playing. Like, there's nothing that you've done or anything like that. It's not anything to do with you. Let them know that, they're not responsible for how you others feel, but just let them know you're going to take time alone. If you just kind of go into your room without telling them, then children, especially young children, just think the world revolves around them because that's how they're designed. They're very egocentric. And so you need to, again, let them know that it's not about them, but you're just going to take a little bit of time to sit with your emotions. Encourage open conversations about emotions. Okay, so this kind of applies really for, for everybody as well. Just talk about emotions. Don't make it something, when I grew up in the culture I grew up, like I'm from the UK, no one talks about emotions unless something happens and you talk about it a little bit and then you stop talking about it again. So it's familial and it's also societal and culture as well. So try to talk about emotions. You don't have to do it all the time. It's not necessary. I don't believe it's necessary to label every emotion, but just get into the practice of, normalizing talking about emotions. And you can practice emotional regulation techniques together. There are slightly different ones that you might want to do if you're defined or undefined. If you are a parent who is undefined or open and your child has a defined solar plexus, you want to allow your child to experience emotions without trying to fix them, without trying to make them happy. You want to just, allow them. You may feel inclined to want them to be on the high of the wave all the time and want them to be happy and jolly, because again, your conditioning, your experience has made you feel uncomfortable around emotions. So you try to fix them, you try and make them kind of like go away. This can happen very unintentionally. Observe your child's emotions, don't identify with them. So if your child is expressing something, remind yourself that's not mine, I don't need to go there. I can just sit with them, I can just witness it. I'm sure, you will sometimes feel it, like I certainly do. But again, just reminding yourself that you don't need to go there with them can help. Guide your child to find ways to express and regulate themselves. It helps if this can be nonverbal sometimes as well. So sometimes when I see things about emotional regulation, it's a lot about identifying the feeling. I personally don't believe that's always necessary. Sometimes it can be helpful, but I don't think it's necessary all the time, because sometimes that may cause more frustration depending on the child, depending on the situation. So sometimes it can just be helpful to find ways to release the emotion, to go through the emotion, to express it. That could be exercise, it could be breathing, it could be creativity. I've got some tips and things to try at the end. And then discharge emotional energy at the end of each day. So you want to, if you've been picking up emotional energy, you're undefined as a parent, you're picking up emotional energy from someone you've been with all day, you want to give yourself time at the end of the day to discharge that emotional energy that you've been picking up. The third combination would be both of you being defined. What can be helpful here is to get to know which kind of emotional wave or waves you both have, which I'm going to go on to in a moment. Respect each other's emotional processes. Just because you're both emotionally defined, it doesn't mean that you're going to go through the same things at the same time. You could be on a high, they could be on a low, vice versa. You're not going to be on exactly the same trip at the same time. You're not going to be on the same wave at the same time. So respect each other's emotional processes. You're probably going to have different ways of processing things. Practice emotional regulation together as well. But again, you may have different ways that you want to do things. You might want to do things at different times. If you're both undefined or open, again, continue to communicate openly about emotions. Be truthful. Get comfortable with confrontation, with talking about emotions. There may be some work for you to do here as a parent, because you likely have conditioning around feeling that you don't want to confront things. You maybe don't want to have difficult conversations with someone because you're, consciously or subconsciously considering that they might have an emotional reaction, and that's something that you experienced in your childhood that makes you feel uncomfortable. But it's really important for you to be able to work through that, regardless of whether your child is defined or undefined. But I would say particularly if they're undefined, because you want to be able to model that healthy, wise expression and that intelligence about emotional energy that you have the potential to experience once you kind of let go of this conditioning that you might have. You can both practice together letting go of emotions and emotional energy at the end of the day, because if you've been around other people, even though together, you might have this undefined, when you've been around other people, you're invariably through, percentages going to have picked up emotions from other people. So again, just letting go of that emotional energy at the end of the day. Notice not self-talk. So let's go to this place because there won't be any confrontation. I just thought about that yesterday. I was like, I'm going to go to this cafe. Oh no, because someone might be there. And like, just notice when you have those kinds of things, you're avoiding going to places because you don't want to have confrontation and you don't want to have an interaction with somebody. If you don't want to address something, you don't want to have this difficult conversation, you'd rather avoid something. I'm not going to say I don't want to rock the boat. I won't say the truth. I won't say what I really think or feel because I don't want to rock the boat. I'm going to be nice so that they like me. I'm afraid to tell the truth because it might hurt their feelings. All these kinds of things are classic indicators of not self-talk, of the undefined solar plexus. Could be defined solar plexus as well, but certainly undefined solar plexus. I just want to give you a little bit of information now on the emotional wave. If this feels overwhelming for you at this stage, then leave it and come back to it another time. But it can be really helpful because you can understand here again the nuances of emotional wave, because they're not all the same in the way that somebody emotionally expresses themselves. So there are essentially 4 types of emotional wave. Now, somebody might have more than one of these. What you're going to be looking for here is the whole channel being defined, not one of the gates, but the whole channel. So you will only have a whole channel. By a whole channel, I mean one line, okay? So this whole line here, for example. So you have both numbers activated in a chart, therefore the whole line would be defined. You will only have that as an example if you have a defined solar plexus. If you have an undefined solar plexus, this doesn't apply. You don't have an emotional wave because you don't have a defined solar plexus. You may still identify with some of these because perhaps you've got one of the gates activated. But when I'm talking about emotional wave here, I'm talking about people with a defined solar plexus. So you get a center defined when there is a connection via a channel, via one of these lines between another center. Okay, that's when a center becomes defined. Okay, so if you have the 59.6, if you have this channel colored in, you will have what's called the source wave. This generally feels a little bit more stable. And again, I witness this in other people as well. These people don't appear to be as emotional to me. It generally takes another person to bring it to the surface. Okay, so it's kind of a little bit more calm and even and steady. We then have the tribal wave. So this is channel 19 to 49 or 3740. These are both tribal waves. So this has an emotional wave or emotional experience that it's kind of activated through physical touch, has a sensitivity to the needs of themselves and needs of others. And it tends to go through this wave that it kind of like ratchets up and then explodes. This can be children that have quite explosive behavior sometimes, or you might notice if like you can sense it a bit emotional, if you touch them, it's just boom, and it suddenly like really kind of comes out. Okay, so if you have a child that has a one of the tribal channels, so the 1949 here or the 3740, and you notice they're in their emotions, I would recommend that you ask them if they want to be touched, or you just hold back. You might have it's sort of an inclination to go straight in and hug them. They may not want that. I certainly recognize that with my son when he's emotional. I say, do you want to cuddle? And sometimes he'll say no, he doesn't want me to touch him. And I see it like if I do kind of, you know, just go in sometimes and I kind of go in to touch him, it's quite powerful. So they're very, very sensitive to physical touch. Sometimes they might also really want cuddles, but it's really again about just kind of recognizing what they want and what they need, not kind of thinking, oh, well, I would want to hug, therefore I'll hug them. We've then got the individual waves, so the 1222 and the 3955. This operates through a kind of expression of moodiness, emotions, melancholy, or passion. This can often be people that are quite creative in nature. They really need to know when to be alone and when to be social. So particularly someone that has the 1222 channel, obviously if they have the channel defined, they will have emotional authority. They may say yes to something because they're feeling social, and then when the time comes around, they might not want to do it. So anyone that has a 1222 channel, please give them grace to change their mind. Because it won't be immediately apparent to them if they need to be alone or if they want to be social. So this tends to move on a little bit more like an even keel. And when they are emotional, it tends to be smaller, shorter up and down spikes. Now, as I said, somebody can have two of these. My son also has one of these. So I can kind of generally be able to tell if it's this one or that one, but basically just knowing that he has multiple ones is helpful for me as well. And then the collective wave is the 4130 and the 3536. So this kind of goes from peaks to valleys, and based on expectations, it crashes when a desire or expectation is not met. So these can be people that really sort of build something up in their mind or in their heart, and then if these expectations aren't met, they kind of have this big crash. So this could be a child, for example, that is like really, really looking forward to something. Like maybe they're really looking forward to, like, you know, going to the park, and then, you know, it's raining and you can't go to the park, and then they're suddenly really emotional, and it could seem like it's almost out of proportion to you, like what the emotions are. But if they have a collective wave, they've like built up this expectation, and then that doesn't get met, and then it really crashes. So this is kind of like a nice to know. This is really interesting, so that you can understand the nuance a little bit more. But like I said, if this feels a little bit too much for you, if you're brand new to human design, you can just pop this aside. You can always come back to look at it again later. I like to illustrate things with personal examples. I find that's very helpful for a lot of people. It's a way that I learn as well experientially. I'm also a sixth line, so I like to share things about my own experiences. That's what I'm designed to do. So my child has a defined solar plexus. I have an undefined solar plexus. It's been a very interesting experience for me, having not really been around someone with a defined solar plexus all the time for quite a long period of time. So what this means for me is that my son will influence me emotionally. Okay. He's pushing out emotions. I have the potential to take them in and amplify them. Okay, so I need to just kind of hold that awareness, being the adult, being the one that has more awareness at this age. He's only 2.5. I need to hold that awareness of that. There may be trust issues in the relationship because he might not feel that I understand his emotions, because he's the one that's pushing the energy out, I'm taking it in. I need to know not to take his emotions seriously or personally, and I might need time alone to discharge the emotional energy that I've taken in from him. But what I do day to day with this is, I know that I have this sensitivity, and then I'm empathetic, and then I have the potential to feel other people's emotions. Obviously, with my son as well, I do tend to take things more personally because we have this connection and he's my son. And so I just have to hold this in my awareness and, you know, really just kind of remind myself of this on a regular basis. When my son has emotional outbursts, emotional displays, I try to remind myself as much as possible that it's not personal. He's not rejecting me, or he's not upset at me, and it's not my energy. I do my best not to go there with him. So I do my best not to allow myself to kind of go into that energy and to get upset as well, but rather to just witness it. It doesn't always work. There have been times where he's crying and I end up in a flood of tears as well, because I'm human, but I remind myself that all the time. I also remind myself that he has a lot of individual energy, and so not to try to make him be happy when he's in a melancholy state. This is something that I've really been aware of, because when I notice that, yeah, he's just in whatever emotion he's in, I feel tension in my body. I feel uncomfortable in my body, and I feel like I want to fix it. And so witnessing this reaction myself has been very interesting as well. And, refraining from actually doing anything or saying anything other than asking him if there's anything he needs, not trying to change it because it's making me feel uncomfortable. That's been really interesting to witness. If you're witnessing your child is feeling kind of melancholy, they're a bit down, it shouldn't be confused with depression. I'm not saying depression doesn't exist, but a lot of the time, in my personal experience as well, I believe sometimes people are medicated for depression when it might just be melancholy, or when we believe that there's something wrong. We perceive there to be something wrong when it's just how their energy is. Again, I'm not saying that depression doesn't exist. We've certainly experienced depression, but I think sometimes without this full awareness, we see things for something being wrong when it's just something that might pass. Okay, and I think this is the case quite often with children, that sometimes we jump into something, diagnosing something too quickly. It's not to say that these things don't exist, but I think sometimes we can just take a moment to witness things and observe things. So here are some tips. Self-awareness. So with all energy, but particularly emotional energy, whose energy is it? A way to tell if an energy is yours. Number one, you can ask yourself or your intuition, is this mine? You'll normally get some kind of indication in your body, like as a yes or a no. I don't mean kind of thinking for your mind, but usually when you can just kind of like, is this mine? Kind of a first reaction that will come to you will be correct for you. Move into your own aura. So move away from somebody else. So our auric field, like I've said before, is around about 2 meters. It extends out from us in all direction. When you're with somebody else in close proximity, even if your back is against the wall and there's somebody, you're in an apartment and there's someone on the other side of the wall, you can still be in auric contact. So move into your own aura, go into another room, go into another building, notice what changes. Experiment with taking time apart from somebody when you feel friction. So whether that's your child, obviously, as long as everybody is safe, or whether that's a partner or a friend or whoever it might be, once you feel this friction there, take some time apart, and then just notice if you kind of like start to sort of simmer back down. Notice what happens to your emotions or what happens to your energy. Anywhere that you're undefined in your chart, be a sieve, not a sponge. So allow the energy to just kind of pass through you, glean this wisdom from it, but don't take it in, don't hold it in like a sponge. Anywhere where you're defined and you're pushing energy out, try to be not in a false positive, not in like a whitewashing spiritual narcissism way, but trying to be a beacon of bright light, not a black hole. So I'm not saying, yeah, just kind of like pretend to be happy when you're not, but just trying to be kind of aware of your energy and the energy that you're pushing out around other people. Communication is so important. And again, I wish that we had learned more things about how to effectively communicate in school. I hope that that is maybe being taught now. As I said, I gave you tips previously in the previous class on some communication tips with type, strategy, and authority according to how your children are defined. You can ask people as well. You can ask your children closed questions. So generators and manifesting generators, do you want a hug? Versus asking other types open questions. For example, what do you need? What do you want? What is going to help you feel XYZ? How do you want to feel? Remembering that some types of authorities require time and space in their own aura to be able to make correct decisions. So again, particularly when there's like been big emotions, just allowing plenty of time, I think, is also really helpful. Not trying to like push somebody into then kind of like letting you know what they need straight away, because they might not know. Also, this is an important one. If your child retreats to their room when they're upset, don't take it personally. Keep communication open. Assure them you're there to listen if and when they want. They may not, so respect that too, while simultaneously respecting their autonomy and privacy. So it can be really challenging when we see our child being upset. We want to comfort them, we want to help them feel better. However, we need to be aware that in our desire to comfort them, we're not unconsciously suppressing them, because that's what can happen sometimes. So as much as possible, try to respect your child's autonomy and privacy and their wishes. Really, just keeping open communication. If they go to their room and they slam the door or they say anything to you, just try to remain calm and just, again, keep communication open. They may come back to you and talk to you about things later on, but don't push them, because that can, again, cause people to suppress emotions or suppress things. And here are a few tips to understand, like, again, how you can emotionally regulate according to definition of the solar plexus. Remember, this is an experiment. So take what feels good, experiment with this. Like, this is not hard and fast rules. This is not like I say this, so it's correct. But here are some things you can try. Remember, human design is all about experimenting. If you or your child has a defined solar plexus, this is more about feeling emotions fully. Like I said, I don't believe you need to name every emotion, but just allowing yourself to feel them. Take time and space for healthy expression. So if you're a parent with a defined solar plexus, it can be helpful for you, if you're feeling a lot of emotions, to take yourself out of the lounge, for example, into your bedroom and just spend some time with you processing them. Learn that emotions are not good or bad. Emotions are just emotions. They're chemical, they're not personal. They're things that come and go. Take responsibility for your own emotions and don't project them onto others or blame others. If you have an undefined solar plexus, release what isn't yours. You need to let feelings pass through you, again, being a sieve, not a sponge. Get comfortable feeling that you're able to speak the truth and unafraid of others' emotional reactions. So there's a natural discomfort for people with an undefined solar plexus, for adults, to confront things, to be able to speak to people about the truth, but you need to get comfortable with that. And let go of feeling responsible for other people's emotions. You may have been made responsible as a child. There may be a lot of conditioning around this. You're not responsible for other people's emotions, okay? And there's nothing that you need to do, nothing that you need to fix. So if you or your child has a defined solar plexus, again, here are some suggestions based on how the solar plexus is defined. So through which one of the waves, through which one of the channels that you can try according to what they have. So again, there might be several different channels defined here. If, again, like I said before, if there are just some of the numbers here, some of the gates, this doesn't apply. I'm talking about when somebody has a full line, a full channel connected from one center to another. Okay, so if it's a collective wave, doing things like talking it out, therapy, time with friends, music, dance, think about being with people, think about being in the collective, okay, in order to process emotions. Individual waves is often more about being alone, maybe crying, writing some poetry, music, dance, art. This can be something with other people, but it's typically probably going to be someone that wants to process things alone. Or the tribal, the 1949 or the 3740, this might be more like physical touch, co-regulation, time with family. It could also be time alone. And then the 59-6 is often about intimacy, closeness, and connection. If you or your child has an undefined solar plexus, remember that, it's not consistent. The way you experience emotions isn't consistent. So you might want to kind of try different things. The way that you release emotions is going to vary too. This is a process you can take your child through to understand their emotional energy if they're undefined. Again, this is going to depend on their age, obviously. They're suddenly feeling emotional. Did this feeling come out of nowhere? Yes. Like, were they feeling totally fine and then they were with someone and all of a sudden they felt these emotions? If it's yes, they're likely amplifying someone or something in their environment. If it's no, Can they name where it came from? Like, did they suddenly start thinking about something and they became upset because they brought back a memory, they brought back a thought of like when their dog died or something? If that's a yes, release it, like somatically, through breath work, through body work, through talking, maybe through cuddling. um no, if they say no, they don't know where this feeling came from, they just suddenly came, this feeling came over and they weren't with anybody, then explore it. You can ask some questions. Where do they feel it in their body? What does it feel like? Hot, cold, big, tight, heavy? What might it be trying to tell them? Again, children are really, really highly intuitive. If you ask them these questions, they often know a lot more than we give them credit for. They just don't have the experience that we have yet. So can they identify what this feeling might be trying to tell them? Maybe they suddenly feel scared. And actually maybe it is because they thought of something or they're worried about something in the future. Again, communication, communication, communication. So I hope that you enjoyed that and that gave you lots of aha moments and like, oh my God, into emotions. And I hope that gives you some tips to help you manage the emotions and navigate the emotions in your family dynamic. I really hope you will join me for the next part, for part 3, which is about nourishing our kids' brains and bodies. We're going to be taking a little peek into optimal development through part of the human design chart called the primary health system. It's really amazing. You're going to love it. I hope to see you there.